tale written in 1822 by William Harrison Ainsworth, refreshed for the modern listener. In the waning days of 1655, the castle of Hernswolf, cloaked in the deep shadows of the Black Forest, became a beacon of fashion and revelry. The Baron, lord of this domain, stood as the most formidable noble in all Germany, his fame woven from the dual threads of his son's patriotic feats and the ethereal beauty of his sole daughter. The land of Hernswolf, nestled at the heart of the forest, was a gift from a grateful nation to an ancestor of the Baron. A legacy passed down like a whispered secret through generations to its current master. The castle itself, an echo of Gothic dreams, rose from the earth in castellated glory, its architecture a grand testament to the ambitions of a bygone era. Yet within its walls lay a labyrinth of shadowed corridors and tapestry-draped vaults, rooms of such vast and echoing magnificence that they seemed almost too grand for the mere trivialities of daily life, their sheer scale rendering them as cold and unwelcoming as the darkest depths of the forest outside. This dark, brooding castle, with its grove of pine and mountain ash, stood as a solitary sentinel amidst the wilderness. The trees, like silent guardians, cast their somber shadows over the stone and mortar, creating an aura of perpetual twilight. Here, in this secluded realm, the brightness of the sun seldom danced, its rays lost amidst the dense canopy, leaving the castle and its inhabitants in a perpetual state of twilight gloom, a world apart from the warmth and light of the world beyond its gates. As twilight's icy fingers crept across the land, the castle of Hernswolf echoed with the jubilant clang of bells, heralding the onset of night and the arrival of guests. There, perched upon the battlements like crows awaiting a story, the warder and his retinue stood vigilant, their eyes scanning the horizon. In the heart of the castle, Lady Clotilda, the Baron's daughter, a bloom of 17 years, was the center of a gathering storm of celebration. The grand vaulted chambers of the castle, with their stone ribs arching overhead like the bones of some ancient leviathan, were thrown open. Laughter and music filled the air, a fragile bubble of warmth in the cold stone heart of Hernswolf. But as the gaiety swirled, the clock in the dungeon tower told, its chimes a solemn counterpoint to the revelry. And with the echo of the last stroke, a stranger, shrouded in the garb of night itself, materialized in the ballroom. His presence was a shadow on the wall, a chill in the air. Courteous bows he offered, like a dark prince from a forgotten tale. Yet the assembly met him with a guarded wariness. This enigmatic noble, a riddle wrapped in midnight attire, captivated the youthful Lady Clotilda. His words were like threads of silver, weaving a tapestry of fascinating tales and witty repartee. The Baron, though hesitant, was drawn into the web of intrigue spun by this unknown guest, and extended an invitation for a prolonged stay, which was accepted with a shadow of a smile. As the castle surrendered to the grip of night, a strange symphony unfolded. The bell in the gray tower swung of its own accord, a mournful dirge under a breathless sky. Whispers of ethereal music intertwined with unsettling sounds emanated from the stranger's quarters. setting the castle's dreamscape astir. At breakfast, under the scrutinizing eyes of the morning, the stranger's saturnine smile flickered with a dark, unspoken secret. His conversations with Clotilda painted vistas of distant, sun-kissed lands where days melt into nights of enchantment, stirring a longing in her heart. In the ensuing days, Clotilda found herself ensnared in a web of unspoken passion, woven by the stranger's gaze and honeyed words, yet, in moments unseen, his countenance would betray a fleeting sneer, a shadow of some hidden malice. In the company of others, he was the epitome of respect and deference, but in the solitary wanderings through the forest's gloomy embrace, he revealed the fervor of a concealed admirer. In the dusky, wood-paneled library of the castle, as evening unfurled its shadows, the Baron and the stranger found themselves ensnared in a conversation that drifted like an unmoored ship towards the realms of the supernatural. The stranger, a cipher cloaked in reserve and mystery, listened as the Baron, with a jesting bravado, scorned the very idea of spirits. Yet, as he spoke, the stranger's eyes kindled with an otherworldly fire, his form seeming to expand, reaching out to the edges of possibility. In the wake of their talk, a silence fell, profound and unsettling. Then, as if summoned by an unseen conductor, a chorus of heavenly music wound its way through the forest glade, a melody of celestial beauty that entranced all but the stranger. In his eyes, there flickered a sorrowful compassion, a tear shimmering in the dark pools of his gaze. But as swiftly as it had come, the music faded into the night, leaving behind a hush that seemed to echo with unspoken secrets. The Baron left the room, followed by the stranger. But soon, the castle was shaken by a sound of mortal anguish. The Baron was found, life extinguished in the corridors, a brutal imprint upon his throat. A frantic search ensued, but the stranger had vanished like a shadow at daybreak. The Baron's body was laid to rest, and the memory of that night lingered like a ghostly echo in the halls of Hernswolf. In the wake of the stranger's departure, Clotilda's spirit withered. She wandered the paths he had once trodden, haunted by his words, his smile. Solitude became her refuge, where she surrendered to her grief. Her love for the stranger, a hidden torrent breaking free in the privacy of her chamber. One evening, as she walked to her secluded haven, the stranger appeared, stepping lightly to her side. His return kindled a flame of hope in Clotilda, but his words were laced with scorn and dark undertones. He spoke of far-off lands, of the love she held for him, offering her a heath rose as a symbol of his affection. Clotilda, seeing the transient nature of the flower, yearned for a love as enduring as the evergreen. The stranger's response was a chilling revelation of his own tormented soul, a heart cold and lifeless, a being forsaken by both God and man. Yet, Clotilda, steadfast in her love, vowed to stay by his side, to be his solace against the world's scorn. The stranger, with a sinister sneer, quickly masked, then led Clotilda to a grim oath. Under the darkening sky, he conjured a curse of unimaginable horror, binding her to him with words that echoed with the malice of the damned. Terrified, Clotilda pledged her eternal fidelity with a triumphant cry. The stranger claimed Clotilda as his own, body and soul. Their next meeting, he declared, would be to seal their union, leaving her with a cold kiss and a promise of a future meeting in the chapel. He vanished, leaving Clotilda alone with the haunting weight of her promise and the shadow of the stranger's dark power lingering in the air. When Clotilda stepped into the castle, her presence seemed less like that of a living being and more like a specter haunted by shadows of a melancholy so deep it could have drowned the sun. Her family, those strange, familiar faces, attempted in vain to pry open the locked doors of her unease. The oath she had sworn held her captive, rendering her unable to speak or even let her face betray the slightest hint of her turmoil. As night wrapped its dark cloak around the world, the family, one by one, surrendered to sleep. Clotilda, however, whose mind was a tempest of restless thoughts, found no comfort in her bed and sought refuge in the library. There, surrounded by the whispered secrets of 1,000 books, she sat alone as the lamp's light flickered and died, surrendering the room to shadows. The clock, nestled in the castle's northern tower, chimed the witching hour, its sound a lonely echo in the vastness of the night. It was then that the room's oaken door creaked open, admitting a figure as pale and silent as a ghost, clothed in the trappings of the grave. It glided towards her, soundless as a shadow, until its icy hand clasped hers, and a voice, as solemn as the grave itself, whispered her name, Clotilda. She lifted her eyes, and there he stood, her father, a specter of regret and sorrow. His voice, filled with a mournful resonance, spoke of a wedding in the grave, an eerie union to be held on the morrow. Tomorrow, Clotilda whispered, a voice barely there, speaking of a bond that must be broken. The apparition then receded, fading into the shadows from whence it came. Morning turned to evening, and as the clock struck 8, Clotilda ventured towards the chapel. The night was a canvas of dark clouds, the wind a mournful symphony through the trees. At the chapel, she was met by the stranger, his face twisted into a sneer of mockery. "Why, this is well, my bride," he greeted her, his words sharp as knives. In silence, they walked through the chapel's twisting paths to the cemetery beyond. The stranger's voice, now soft yet laced with malice, spoke of an end to the struggle, a young and pure spirit to be sacrificed. But it must be, he said, haunted by the specter of a love that once was. For the fiend whom I obey has so willed it. Clotilda, her heart heavy with an unspoken dread, walked beside the stranger through a landscape that seemed to have been plucked from the darkest of fairy tales. "My dear, we are indeed headed to our wedding, but ours is a ceremony unlike any other," he said, his voice a chilling blend of solemnity and mockery. "Death himself will be our officiant. Your ancestors, now but decaying skeletons, will be in attendance, and the worms, feasting upon the bones of the departed, will bear witness to our union. Come, we mustn't keep death waiting." Guided by a ghostly blue light, they arrived at an open vault at the edge of the churchyard and entered into a world where the wind whispered through the remnants of the dead. The ground beneath their feet was a macabre carpet of bones and decayed coffins. At the heart of this tomb, a grotesque throne made of unburied skeletons loomed, upon which sat a figure too ghastly for the living world. Laughter, cold and cruel, echoed through the vault, as if the dead themselves found mirth in this grim procession. The stranger, holding Clotilda's hand, seemed to falter for a moment, a tear betraying a flicker of humanity. But the ominous figure on the throne of bones frowned at this show of weakness. He began an ancient, forbidden rite, tracing mystic symbols in the air. His voice, a lamentation of despair. You should know who you are joining in this dark union. I am the undying spirit of a man who damned his savior. That final look he gave me, it lingers still, a curse upon my soul. I'm condemned to walk this earth, a pawn of the powers below, until I've delivered 1,000,000 souls. And you, my dear, are the final piece of this grim puzzle. Your innocence made you an easy target. Your father, I murdered him for his boldness, and I allowed him to warn you of your fate. The spell is working perfectly. You're about to see the true extent of the fate you've unknowingly chosen. As long as the seasons turn and the storms rage, your suffering will be eternal. Look below and witness the abyss that awaits. As she looked, the vault cracked open, revealing an inferno beneath them. The screams of millions filled the air, creating a symphony of horror and despair. The stranger, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, held Clotilda over the abyss, tears streaming down his face. But his moment of regret was fleeting. He hardened his heart and hurled her into the void. His voice echoed after her. Don't blame me for this. It's your faith that damned you. Isn't there a fire waiting for the wicked? You found it. Clotilda, innocent and betrayed, fell through the air. Her final glimpse, one of a world lost to her forever. As she plunged into the flames, a chorus rose from the depths, sealing the fate of the spirit who had doomed her. Spirit of evil, this is your eternity, a place where suffering never ends and the flames never die.